Ukrainian forces have withdrawn from Krynky, the town on the far side of Kherson. Just why did they do so now, and what exactly did this operation accomplish? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is, again, an interesting development that, frankly, I'm surprised hadn't been resolved already. I kind of honestly assumed that it had been resolved and just sort of not extensively reported. You might remember during the counteroffensive in 2023, the Ukrainian Marines crossed the Dnieper River and established a small bridgehead in and around this town of Krynky here. And this was part of an operation that was meant to draw Russian forces or fix Russian forces in this Kherson bank, right? Because what we saw was that as the counteroffensive in Zaporizhzhia was progressing, that Russian forces were diverting a lot of troops from this Kherson line to Zaporizhzhia, and that reinforcing, trying to plug the breakthrough attempt of Ukrainian forces. Now, Ukrainian forces the Ukrainians had their Marines cross the Dnieper and form a small bridgehead, simply, it seemed, to keep the Russians honest, to ensure that they would not redeploy their significant numbers of the units here, and that keeping them pinned in Kherson would allow the main elements in and around Zaporizhzhia to stage their breakthrough. Now, obviously, the counteroffensive has effectively been over and didn't achieve any of its objectives for several months now. So why then the Ukrainian forces continued to hold Krynky is kind of beyond me. And I point this out because the town itself is of little strategic value. And when the initial landing happened, there was thoughts that maybe the Russians had depleted this far side of the Dnieper so much that the Ukrainians could actually stage a larger breakthrough. But it was always logistically tough because the Ukrainians could never build a pontoon bridge, right? If they were to build a pontoon bridge, Russian airstrikes or Russian artillery as long as they were within 10 kilometers of the river, they could take out that pontoon bridge. And so that meant that Ukrainians had to rely on boats and small craft to keep their units resupplied. That meant that there was kind of a limit to the rate at which they could move men and material to this far side bridgehead. And without a steady flow, the Marines in Krynky were never really going to be able to stage a breakthrough. But if their goal was only to fix Russian forces, that's okay. That is A-okay. That is sufficient. But the counteroffensive has been over for a long time. And so it really actually does bother me and make me question why the Ukrainians chose now to withdraw from Krynky. And what really bothers me is, again, the statement that the Ukrainian command made. Now, if you're interested in seeing some of the combat footage, not just from Krynky, but from across the front lines, we just dropped another video for members on combatvetnews.com. First off, a huge thank you to all the members. But the video we just took a look at, I can't show you here because of YouTube's terms of service, but it covers the changing Russian tactics in response to drones, that Russian forces in some ways seem to be completely clueless as to how to fight FPV drones. Some of them appear to have given up entirely. It's kind of crazy. And the rise of FPV drones really means that the personal risk of sending Marines across the Dnieper doesn't really carry as much effect when Ukrainians could achieve comparable levels of destruction of Russian forces using drones operated on the far side of the river. But what really bothers me about become a member, combatvetnews.com, links in the description. We also just dropped the Q&A video, by the way, today. Second one, thanks to all you guys that submitted questions. We talked about my experience in Afghanistan, if soldiers ever did something that I thought was hilarious, but still had to be the mean old curmudgeon-y lieutenant. The answer is yeah, of course. But that's only for lieutenant tier and above. Okay. So the Ukrainian statement here is that they said, it is true that most of the main positions of the Ukrainian troops in the village of Krynky, as a result of intense, combined, and prolonged enemy fire, were completely destroyed. That bothers me, that they didn't withdraw, right? They said the defense forces of Ukraine continue to carry out combat missions on the left bank of the Dnipro, particularly around Krynky, but that the main positions have been destroyed. This implies that now they are focusing more on raids. And we've seen that raids have been much more successful, right? Like the Freedom of Russia Legion operations in Belgorod, where they cross the border, they cause a bunch of problems, they withdraw. That means that Russia has to deploy defensive troops around the clock to counter those raids, but the actual commitment of Ukrainian troops to the operation is minimal. And so the fact that these Krynky operations were not also raids is kind of weird and bothersome. Again, when the counteroffensive was happening and they had to draw Russian forces away somehow, it made sense to sustain a presence there. But to continue that presence long after the counteroffensive ended, when clearly there was no breakthrough, they had no logistical solution, made no sense. It incurred a lot of casualties, right? Ukraine hasn't officially revealed its losses, but they've said it's almost impossible to retrieve the bodies of soldiers who are killed in transit, killed in the river, and that there are 262 soldiers who were definitively identified as KIA in Krynky, but nearly 800 soldiers are officially considered missing, likely killed in the transit over the river. So it's hard to know just what exactly this achieved. And again, it was just so fraught. It was so difficult. And once it became clear that there wasn't a breakthrough, then it became a problem. And it became, I think, more political than tactical, right? Russian Minister Sergei Shoigu had claimed in February that Russian troops had retaken Krynky, but Kiev said, no, we're still there. I can show you, right? And they thought it was maybe Shoigu trying to claim a win ahead of Putin's presidential election. But after wave after wave of Russian assaults and Ukrainian forces unable to get the necessary equipment at scale because of the lack of a pontoon bridge or real bridge, it just sort of became a pointless endeavor. Even some soldiers admitted that digging in was impossible in the swampy terrain, and Krynky turned into, quote, a pile of rubble with little left to hold onto. And this sort of is kind of the final pin in Ukraine's failed counteroffensive, right? And many analysts and soldiers told the Kiev Independent last year said that the goal of the Krynky operation wasn't really tactical. It was to at least roll out some kind of success to the public and to reassure Western partners. This is a terrible way to do it. Again, there's lots of other ways and places that Ukrainians could have spent an entire brigade of Marines, 1,000 Ukrainian Marines, highly trained, highly motivated, would have been better served in numerous places in the front line. For example, they could have helped push the Russians out of Volchansk or Heilboka, both areas where the Russians seem to have a more tenuous foothold. If you're looking for wins, again, this was not the place to look for them. You're trying to get a win while stacking the deck totally against yourself. And that is, I think, what bothers me about this more than anything else, is just Ukrainian command's willingness to sacrifice real lives and real troops for symbolic victories. It's one of the things that I think Syrskyi has abandoned as a concept, right? He said, hey, we're willing to assume to give Russia tiny gains here and there in order to inflict a high level of casualties. And that has actually been a lot more effective than a lot of other strategies, particularly Zaluzny's strategy of not 1 inch backward, which is a little Soviet, if you ask me. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you so much to our Colonel tier members, particularly James Jerling, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alan Knudsen, Bastian Hemmerling, and Yanko Georgiev. And a huge thank you to our Lieutenant tier members. If you want to get your name in this hall of prestige, you can become a member. So check it out. Link is in the description. And be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. See ya. Cheers.